you ever just sat and watched people? I don't mean a quick glance on the bus or in line at the grocery store. I mean really watched them, soaking the details until you feel like you know them. I do it all the time. It's my whole world, pretty much. From the little wooden booth at the entrance to Northwood State Park, I have a perfect, uninterrupted view of happiness arriving in waves. My job title is park attendant, but a more honest one would be official observer of other people's joy. I see them roll in, car stereos thumping out summer hits, windows down with arms dangling in the breeze, couples holding hands, their fingers laced together so tightly it's like they're trying to become one person, families with kids who spill out of the back seat before the car is even fully stopped, all flailing limbs and shrieks of laughter, chasing each other toward the glittering lake before their parents can even get the cooler out of the trunk. I watch the way a teenage girl will throw her head back when she laughs at something her boyfriend said, the sunlight catching in her hair. I see the way he looks at her, just for a second, like he's just seen the sunrise for the first time. I notice the easy, thoughtless way a father rests his hand on his son's shoulder, a silent gesture that says everything. You're safe. I'm here. You belong. These are the little things, right? The things you're supposed to just have, like breathing or blinking. For me, they're a foreign language. I can understand, but could never, ever speak. I'm fluent in the grammar of affection, but the words always die on my tongue. My purpose, if you can call it that, is just to get through the shift, to collect the crumpled dollar bills, offer a smile that I know doesn't reach my eyes, and add another snapshot of belonging to the sprawling, silent museum inside my head. It's always been this way. As far back as I can remember, my life was divided into two parts, the work and the watching. The work was for him, the demon. I don't know what else to call the shadow that owned my every waking moment, the constant pressure behind my eyes. He wasn't a monster with horns and a pitchfork, he was a weight in the air, a whisper that felt like sandpaper rubbing against the inside of my brain. His demands were constant and grueling, polishing every single stone in the fireplace until they gleamed, only to be told to coat them in ash and start over. Digging holes in the backyard for hours under the moon, my muscles screaming, then filling them back in before sunrise. It was labor designed to break not just my body, but my mind, to leave me too exhausted to do nothing but ache. My free time was spent at my bedroom window, which overlooked the park behind our house. That was the other side of my education. I watched the neighborhood kids play tag, their sneakers kicking up clouds of dust in the fading light. I saw first crushes bloom in shy glances, secret handshakes exchanged, and scraped knees that were fixed with a hug from a mom. I learned everything I know about being human from that window. I saw it all, felt none of it. I was a ghost haunting the edge of their world, separated by an unbreakable pane of glass. But the deepest cuts didn't come from the bullies at school, although his influence made sure there were plenty, or even from the endless, pointless work. The real horror, the thing that cracked me open for good, came the day I found my mother's journals. I was 13, and for once, the work had ended early. I found them tucked away in a dusty chest in the attic, and my first thought was that maybe finally I could understand her. I could find a single page that explained why she never looked me in the eye, why my father's touch was always a flinch. Instead, I found him, the demon. She and my father had written to him, about him. They'd invited him in. It was all there, in her neat, looping handwriting. A contract. They'd offered me up before I was ever born, a sacrifice on the altar of their ambition. All the work, all the loneliness, the endless parade of ridicule, it was all a transaction. My suffering in exchange for their comfort, their success, my father's promotion, my mother's small-town social standing. That was the day I understood. The solitude wasn't an accident, and the cruelty wasn't random. It was a cage built just for me, and my own parents held the key. They'd starved me of every scrap of love and left me to press my face against the glass of a life I was never meant to live. That was when I realized my deepest fear was true. I am fundamentally unlovable. And a terrible thought, a whisper that sounded a lot like the demons, began to bloom in the empty space where a heart should be. If I can't be given joy, maybe I can just take it. That thought didn't manifest as a grand evil plan, not at first. It was just a single dark seed planted in the barren soil of my mind, and for weeks, it just sat there, dormant. I went to work, I handed out maps, I took the $5 entry fees, and I watched. But the watching had changed. It was no longer passive or wistful, it was hungry. My gaze started to linger, to dissect the happiness I saw, trying to understand its mechanics. I wasn't just observing joy anymore, I was casing the joint. I started to focus on one family in particular. I didn't know their name at first, but they were regulars. Every Sunday, Saturday, like clockwork. The Millers. They were perfect, like a painting of a happy family come to life. The dad, Mark, had a booming laugh and would swing his daughter, Sophie, so high she seemed to touch the clouds, her delighted shrieks echoing across the park. The mom, Winnie, always packed these picture-perfect lunches in a wicker basket with sandwiches cut into triangles and not a single crest in sight. And then there was their son, Barlow. He was maybe 6 years old, with a mop of blonde hair and a smile that could light up the whole park. He had the purest laugh I'd ever heard. It wasn't just a sound, it was like a physical thing, a bright, bubbling energy. They were a symphony of happiness, and I couldn't look away. I learned their rhythms. I knew they always claimed the picnic table under the big oak tree. I knew that Barlow would always run to the swings first, demanding his dad push him higher and higher. I knew that Winnie would always collect dandelions for her mom. I watched them so closely I felt like I was a part of their story, a silent, unseen character lurking in the background. My focus narrowed until it was fixed entirely on Barlow's laugh. It was the brightest thing in my gray world. One Tuesday, a rare weekday visit for them, the park was almost empty. It was just them and me. The air was warm and thick with the smell of pine. As they packed their car to leave, laughing about something Barlow had said, I focused on that sound. I didn't just listen to it this time, I did something else. From my little booth, I leaned my head against the cool glass, closed my eyes, and I pulled. I imagined that sound, that bubbling, untainted joy as a golden thread stretching from his chest to mine. I pictured it flowing out of him and into the cavernous emptiness inside me. I imagined the warmth of it, the feeling of a life without constant grinding work and the cold shoulder of the world. For just a second, a dizzying, powerful wave of heat washed over me. It was a phantom sensation, but it was so intense it made me gasp and my vision swim. It felt like standing in the sun after a lifetime in a cellar. A current of pure, unadulterated warmth flooded my veins, making my fingertips tingle. Then, just as quickly as it came, it was gone. The Miller's car door slammed shut, the engine started, and they drove away. The park grew quiet again, the sudden silence deafening. I was left shivering slightly, the echo of that warmth already fading. I sat there for a long time, my heart pounding, and I almost convinced myself I had imagined the whole thing. A desperate daydream. A trick of a lonely mind. The Millers didn't come back that weekend, or the next. I told myself it was nothing. People have lives, plans change, maybe they went to the beach instead. but a knot of cold anxiety tightened in my gut. A part of me, the part that sounded like the demon, was desperate to know the answer. The other part was terrified of the answer. I scanned every car that pulled up to my booth, my breath catching whenever I saw a blue minivan like theirs. But it was never them. Weeks went by. The oak tree they always used sat empty. The swings were still. The memory of that intense warmth I'd felt began to feel more and more like a fever dream, and I started to relax, telling myself it was a coincidence, a sick fantasy my broken-minded cooked up. A kid has a bad day, a family hits a rough patch, and suddenly I'm some kind of monster who can literally steal happiness. It was crazy. I had to prove it was crazy. Then, about a month after that Tuesday, I saw them. I was at the local library, flipping through the town paper, mostly out of boredom, and there they were. It was a photo from some town charity event. The caption read, "Mark and Winnie Miller with their children Sophie and Barlow." It made my blood run cold. It was them, but it was like looking at a photograph that had been left out in the sun for years. All the colors faded to a dull, washed-out gray. Mark's shoulders were slumped. The easy confidence I remembered completely gone. Winnie's smile was a tight, brittle line, that painful imitation of the real thing. Their daughter Sophie clung to her mom's leg, her face buried in the fabric of her dress. But Barlow was what broke me. He was just standing there, holding his mom's hand, his face utterly blank. The brilliant laughing light I remembered from his eyes was gone. It wasn't sadness or anger, it was a void. A perfect, hollow nothing. I stared at that photograph until the newsprint grew damp in my hands. I remember that Tuesday, the warmth, the hungry pull, the golden thread. I had wanted his joy, and looking at that hollowed-out little boy, I understood with a sickening, gut-wrenching certainty that I had taken it. All of it. It had to be impossible, but the evidence was right there in black and white. I had to see for myself. I found their address online, it wasn't hard, and told myself I just needed to see them laughing again, to see the light back in Barlow's eyes. That's all. I just needed to put the delusion to rest. I drove to their house late that night, my hands slick with sweat on the steering wheel. It was a neat little blue house on a quiet street, the kind with a tire swing in the front yard. A perfect home for a perfect family. Every light was off except for a single dim glow from an upstairs window. My heart hammered against my ribs as I crept around the back, drawn forward by a need to know that was stronger than reason, stronger than fear. The back door, a sliding glass one, was unlocked. The house was silent and cold. It didn't feel like a home. It smelled of dust and stale air, the smell of a place where happiness had packed its bags and left without a forwarding address. I moved through the dark kitchen into the living room, my sneakers silent on the carpet. I went up the stairs, following the faint light, each step a thunderclap in the oppressive quiet. It was coming from Barlow's room. The door was ajar. I peered inside. He was sitting on his bed, cross-legged, his back to me, staring at the wall. The only light was from a small rocket ship nightlight plugged into the wall, but its glow was weak and flickering, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe on the walls. And then I felt it, the same presence from my childhood. A weight in the air, a profound cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. The air around the little boy was shimmering, just a little, like heat haze off a summer road. I watched, frozen in the doorway, as the last faint trace of color seemed to drain from the rocket ship's plastic shell, its cheerful red and yellow turning to a murky gray. Its light pulled into the shimmering vortex around the child. The pressure in the room grew, making my ears pop. That's when the whisper slithered into my mind. It was no longer the sandpaper rasp of my youth. It was smooth, sated, and terrifyingly familiar. It said, "A fine vintage. A first of many." I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. The floorboard creaked loudly under my foot. The shimmering stopped. The boy's head turned, slowly, mechanically, his neck making a faint clicking sound. His eyes, Two black and empty pools met mine, and from their depths a joyless smile stretched across his face, a grotesque, knowing parody of the laughter I had stolen. I ran that night. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs gave out, but it didn't matter. There was no escape. That smile, that empty, hollow smile on Barlow Miller's face, followed me. The whisper was no longer a rare intrusion, it was a constant companion, a narrator for my new life. It guided my observations, pointed out the brightest laughs in a crowd, the most carefree smiles in the park. The hunger I'd felt that one afternoon became a physical ache, a gnawing emptiness in my chest that only one thing could fill. The first time, after Barlow, was clumsy and accidental. But I learned. I became a hunter. I couldn't just snatch joy anymore, that felt crude. And the results were diluted. I needed to cultivate it, to bring it to its absolute peak. So I recreated the scenes I had only ever watched from my window. I'd find a lonely kid at the playground and push them on the swings higher and higher until they were screaming with pure unadulterated delight. I'd buy a cone from the ice cream truck for a little girl who had dropped hers, just to see that moment of Tear Street despair transform into radiant gratitude. I would give them a perfect day, an afternoon of pure innocence, an hour of bliss they would never forget. I needed their joy to be at its most potent. It was only fair. And then, when it was perfect, when their happiness was a shining beacon, I would close my eyes and I would consume it. I left behind a string of quiet playgrounds and hollow-eyed children. Now I'm sitting in a small gray room. The table is bolted to the floor. My chair, too. Opposite me sits a detective with tired eyes and a coffee-stained tie. Detective Miller. No relation, just a bitter coincidence that makes the demon chuckle in the back of my mind. He thinks I'm just a sick kid. He's been asking me about the others, about the children who didn't vanish but just stopped. The bright, happy kids who one day became empty shells. He lists their names. I just watch him. I watch the way his jaw tenses when he says their names, the way he taps his pen against his notepad in a frustrated rhythm. I'm trying to see if there's any happiness left in him to take. There isn't. Just bone-deep weariness and a crumbling sort of hope. He has no idea that he isn't alone in this room. Malachi is here. That's the name the whisper finally gave me. He's a cold spot in the corner, a flicker in the detective's reflection on the two-way mirror. He's been patient, letting me do the work, letting them build their case of circumstantial evidence. But his masterpiece is complete, and I think he's ready for his curtain call. "Just tell me why, Jackson," the detective says, his voice a low rumble, leaning forward across the table. "Help me understand." I want to. Oh, God, I want to. For one insane moment, I think maybe I can. This is my one last attempt to escape, to find a single human being who will see the boy and not the monster. I want to tell him about the endless work, the journals, the window, the cold house, the crushing weight of being born as nothing more than a bargaining chip. I want him to understand that I was made this way. But as I open my mouth, the cold in the room intensifies, dropping by 20 degrees in a second. The detective blinks, his brow furrows. His eyes go distant for a second, unfocused. I see it on his face, the flicker of an image not his own. He sees a small boy digging a hole in the dark, his hands raw. He sees a page of a journal, a pact signed in my mother's neat, looping hand. He sees the hungry, pulling energy. He sees the joyless smile on Barlow's face. He doesn't see my pain. Malachi won't allow that. He only shows him my sin. The detective's expression shifts from weary to confusion to a stark, profound horror. He physically recoils, his chair scraping loudly against the concrete floor as he pushes himself away from me, away from the table, and in his eyes, I see the final judgment, the confirmation of everything I've ever feared. There is no escape. Malachi has shown him the truth, and the truth is that I am unlovable. I am a monster. The dam inside me breaks. All the fight, all the pathetic hope just washes away. I say, because it's the only way. And the confession spills out of me, a calm, horrifying torrent of placid, gruesome detail. My new world is very small and very white. There is no window to watch from, no park full of laughing families, no glass to press my face against. The walls are soft. The only view is the one inside my own head, and I am not the one in control of the projector anymore. Malachi is no longer just a whisper or a cold spot in the corner. He's here, inside, as tangible as the blood in my veins. He is the architect of my reality now. His feast has begun, and I am the main course. He doesn't just take the good stuff. That was only over the appetizer. Now he consumes what little is left of me. Not all at once, but slowly, deliberately, savoring every last scrap. It's the work all over again, but this time it's my soul he's forcing me to polish and break. He takes the echoes of the joy I stole, siphoning off the phantom warmth until only the memory of the theft remains. Then he moves on to my own meager memories. He takes the memory of the sun on my face, of the scent of rain on hot asphalt, of the one time a teacher smiled at me and I almost felt seen. He plucks them out one by one, and in their place, he leaves only replays. An endless, high-definition loop of my own monstrous acts. I am forced to watch the light go out in their eyes. Again. And again. I see Barlow's hollow smile. I hear the joyful shriek of a little girl on a swing curdle into silence. I see the confusion and fear on a dozen small faces, all reflected back at me 1,000 times. Forever. This is my cage. Not the padded room, but the theater of my own mind, where I am the only audience member and the only villain. My greatest fear wasn't just being a monster. It was the solitude. To be cursed to watch happiness from afar, forever, alone, on the outside looking in. And now, I am. It's the ultimate punchline. I'm the boy who watches, trapped on the wrong side of the glass of my own life, while the demon, sated and strong from his feast, turns its attention to the world outside my padded walls. He's patient. He can wait. His power is restored, his hunger sharpened. He begins his search for 2 new, ambitious parents. People desperate for just a little taste of success. People who are ready to make a deal.
Did that story make your skin crawl? That's just a taste of what's lurking. Show your support by liking and subscribing. We're all in this together to survive the next spine-chilling story.